Welcome to What Do You Want to Do, the show that will hopefully help you figure out what you want to do in life or reconnect you to what you love doing. Each show has a guest who is doing what they want to do, whether it's in their career or in addition to their regular job. Most importantly, we want to help you realize that no matter your age, you too can do what you want to do if you have the will to do it. Now here's your host, Leonard Kaplan.
My guest today is Lou Spagnola, my colleague, my friend, works right down the hall from me, but he also has a secret life. Well, not so secret. He's been a musician for years, a very good bass player, tours around, and we're here to get his story on What Do You Want to Do? So, Lou, thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you, Len, for having me.
So, how did you get into music? And how did you retain your interest in music through your long graphic design career?
When you like something, you like it. It's one of those things that they say, like, I didn't choose music, music chose me.
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid. I used to drive around with my mother. I'd be in the car just listening, and she was like me. She would always just go through the radio stations until she found the song she wanted. And back in the 70s, as you remember, there were much more radio stations. So, and the quality of the music was great. So there was going to always be songs on anywhere from the 50s to the 70s, and I got to love all that music. And so as I got older and I started listening to Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, and that was more what I really wanted to do, was play classic rock kind of music.
That's very interesting. So now your beginnings sound as if I saw you at that age, this guy's going to go into music and make a living at it. Now, why didn't you pursue that as a full-time career, or did you?
No.
You did not. Why didn't you?
No, I didn't, because I'll be honest with you. Everybody starts out thinking that there's the prototypical man with the big cigar, or, I should say stereotypical, but he's the guy that's going to come and sign you and take you away and all of that. But really, this business is made up of a lot of passionate people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know some musicians that are just very passionate about music. They get along with everybody. They love to talk music. They love to be around music. And then there are some club owners that are exactly the same way. They love what they do. They love bringing in bands, and they love working in that atmosphere. The problem, though, is the vast majority don't fit that description. And, there are a lot of shysters around, and it's very hard to get ahead. And then, it's like a big pyramid scheme. Everybody's looking to screw enough people so they can get enough money to move up to the next tier, where they can screw enough people to move up again. And it's not to sound, like I'm bitter. It's just I kind of recognize that, and I did some gigs traveling. I went to Texas and went to Atlanta and Toronto, and I didn't like flying around. I really did not like sitting there at an airport waiting, and then flying in somewhere, and then waiting. And the thing is, you're waiting with people that maybe you don't even know that much, or maybe they're not even your good friends, but
Right.
You're waiting.
Right.
And then you get to the gig and you wait. And then the gig goes off, and then you have the rest of the night, and then you have the next day, and you wait. And your life isn't your own. And that's why I have a lot of respect for touring musicians, and I have a lot of respect for, you look at somebody like Steven Tyler, who, is way out there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because, it's very hard to probably turn it off and go home and just be a family man again. And then you get on stage and, there's millions of people that bought your albums and stuff. So there's 27 steps between where I am and where Mick Jagger is.
Right, right.
I'm not even talking about talent,
Sure.
And for that matter, if you want to know, like, talent, that we could be here another 3 hours if you want to talk that definition. I mean, the fact is, there's kids that are singing over in Central Park in New York right now with a bucket in front of them that are tremendously talented, but they don't have the avenues, they don't get the breaks. And so in my case, I just said, you know what? I'm going to be a decent sized fish in a very small pond. I'm going to make that work for myself. Enough room to swim around, and I get to live my life doing what I want to do, not on somebody else's schedule, and not being told, okay, the gig starts at 11. It's 11 a.m. You have
Right.
12 hours to kill in a place you don't know with people you don't know.
I hear that. I hear that because I had a little Beatles cover band from 1977 to 1980. We had about maybe 5 gigs, and that cured me from wanting to travel. I remember being on Plum Island at a place called the Beachcomber. Maybe you played there. I don't know. It was kind of a dive. I don't know how it is now. It might be a little better, but I remember it was like 2 in the morning, and everybody was leaving, and we were the last ones. We had to break down the equipment. There's no roadies, except if you're a big star. Now I want to harken back to the first part of your answers about shysters out there, these managers. So what you're saying basically is there are more Alan Kleins out there than Brian Epstein's. If
Absolutely.
Beatles fans will know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So the traveling life, I think, for you and myself, really didn't do it for us. It's that's you got to consider that life before you do something like that.
Even being a Mick Jagger, for instance.
Yeah,
I mean, here's a guy that, you know, the reason why a Mick Jagger or Paul McCartney, this, what they did was they can be themselves
sure.
and make millions off it. Like whatever they do is what they wanted to do. It was how they wanted to do it. It was how they wanted to write it. It's their sound.
Yeah.
They were both influenced by many people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and this isn't a detriment to say, but Paul McCartney, at one point sat there listening to Buddy Holly and going, "Oh my God," and Little Richard, and saying,
Yeah.
"I want to be them. I want to do what they want to do."
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to escalate all the way to the very top, where 200 years from now, people will know who Paul McCartney is because of the way that he and Lennon, and of course Harrison,
Mm-hmm.
they did something that they made their own, and they left it behind for others to examine, almost like museum pieces.
Sure.
Now, there's some local Boston bands, like I'll even say Aerosmith. I
Mm-hmm.
think Aerosmith was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't put them in the Beatles category.
Right.
I think many people did what Aerosmith did, which is to have your own sound,
Mm-hmm.
but the influences are too obvious. Like in the Beatles case, and the Stones, the influences aren't too obvious because they were there
Right.
at the beginning in the creation stage. So now to segue that back to what my point is, Paul McCartney flies into a gig by Learjet, and he gets
Mm-hmm.
there when he wants to get there,
Sure.
and he doesn't have to stay in even the best hotels at all, because he might say, okay, well, we have 10 tour dates. We're going to go to New York. We're going to use that Learjet to fly
Mm-hmm.
me to the gigs. We're going to get there 30 minutes before I go on stage, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be in the air 15 minutes after I get off stage. So he's got the life exactly as he wants it.
Sure.
But he's not at home, and he's not doing.
Yeah.
And when you say doing what you want to do, it's, yeah, you want to do music,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still on somebody else's schedule.
Sure.
Because at some point, I'm sure that anyone from Tom Petty, you name it, Prince, at some point, I would bet my life that every one of them sat on a plane and just threw their arms up and said, "Who made this schedule? Why do I have to be here?" And
Well, that's very similar to the life of a professional wrestler. As you know, I've done wrestling talk for 30 odd years, and that's a story about a lot of professional wrestlers.
it's entertainment. It's when you're in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
And athletes, even though there is a competitive nature, you're obviously golfing against each other, or baseball players, you're playing to beat the other team. The same thing. That's why you make the big bucks, because you're on somebody else's schedule and your life isn't your own. You signed on to play somebody else's lead in their play, whether
Right.
you're a baseball
Right.
player, a wrestler, and that's why a lot of these people go crazy. That's why I think a lot of them do drugs. You talk about drugs. Not everybody's uses drugs because they're a junkie. I've actually talked to people that have told me, when you're sitting in a hotel room for 6 hours in a city that you've been to 37 times and hated all 37, what are you going to do? You walk to the library,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or you walk to, you know, I did a gig in Chicago. I wanted to see Lake Superior.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked down and I saw it. And it's the Windy City for a reason, by the way. It was 20 degrees below, and the wind was blowing and hitting my ears, and I didn't have. So I'm walking down the street like this, and I'm saying, "Oh yeah, this is the life," you know. And then you get home, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's awesome! You had a gig in Chicago," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I wish I could have sat in my backyard and you know."
And you probably never even got to see much of Chicago because you were there for the gig and you flew home.
No, and that's the thing, because you have a lot of time to kill, but yet you don't actually have the time. Like for instance, I'm going to make an itinerary. I'm going to get to Chicago, and for
Mm-hmm.
2 hours, I'm going to do this. And 1 hour, you're kind of sitting in your room going, okay, there's a lot of tall buildings. Oh, it's a nice, wow, really, really nice view. And then you do what you got to do, and unfortunately, a lot of what you end up doing is eating. you
Right.
know,
Right.
and you know what happens when you eat when you're bored?
Oh,
You say,
yeah.
"Oh, that's where that 20 pounds came from."
That's right. So I want to accentuate the positive here because we're talking about all the pitfalls of traveling here. I want to know what has kept you in music. You already established your love for it in the beginning and that you didn't want to do it full time, but you do it a lot of weekends. You just did one last weekend. There must be times when you say to yourself, I feel like watching TV or something, or no. Am I putting
Well,
words in your mouth?
well, here's the thing: the touring and the business,
Yeah.
right? That's the downside. But I'll give you an example. And whether you're religious or not,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, religion and faith are two different things. Just like politics and government are two different things.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you could say that, for instance, business is the politics of music, because
Okay.
you can if I sat down, I'll give an example. If I sat down with Paul McCartney, he's very smug, he's stuck up, he's a lot of things, but that's because he's had 50 years of people kissing his behind. Now,
Right.
if you or I sat down and said, "All right, Paul, listen, I don't want to talk about the Beatles. I don't want to talk about your songwriting. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to talk about you as a 14-year-old kid,
Mm-hmm.
and a song come on the radio. Tell me how that made you feel when you heard a song and you said, 'Oh my.'"
That's a great question. I'm sure he'd like to be asked that too.
But that's the difference, though, is that's where you become a fan of music. And the
Mm-hmm.
difference between me, you, and Paul McCartney in that situation
Mm-hmm.
is nothing. We're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
The fluff and the fame and everything else. In fact, what's funny is now the drummer of one of my bands, Tangerine, his niece won a meet and greet. She got to meet Roger Daltrey, and so
Oh.
so he goes in with her, and she's telling him, Roger Daltrey, "My uncle, he's a drummer and he sings. He's awesome. You should hear him play the Who." And Roger Daltrey's probably like, "Yeah, I've met 15,287 of you already."
Right. Right.
So now my friend Paul, he asked him a question, and he told me, he said, when I asked him the question, I saw like the glow came right off. He goes, because I asked him a question that was relatable on a human level. I
Okay.
asked him, what was it like having Keith Moon playing drums behind you?
Right.
And that's where he could say something that was relatable to you and I, or
Sure.
anybody.
Yeah.
When I say you or I just mean
Yeah.
we're just fans of music, that we love
Yeah.
the way music moves us.
Yeah.
And and he said I could see it in his face that it was like he was kind of like, wow, I have a question that now I can just be me. And he
Right.
answered him, and
Right.
he gave him a great answer. And it was like, that's what I think about with music,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm not curing cancer. I'm playing a gig up on Route 1 at Breakaway, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and which is a great place to play. And it's, as I said earlier, about having a great owner who's invested in the product. He's not invested in making money as much as he's invested in making memories of, you come into here tonight, you leave tonight, we all do something good. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm talking about. And that's why you really can't find that. Um, you know, if you're playing these very, very big gigs, there are a lot of people there, and it's a nice memory, and it's especially nice if you have photos to show people. But it's really not the same, and that's why
Right.
the non-business sense now is I sit here every day with my bass and play along to
Hmm.
just whatever comes on my iTunes because I just love music.
Right. That's great. And you have just the right attitude for staying involved. And it's not an obligation. It's something that you love to do.
Well, it's like I said about the politics.
Hmm.
Now I run a band. I book the two bands that I'm in,
Mm.
and there's like every time I have to call club owners and I have to call the guys and I have to send emails out and
Mm.
got to send carrier pigeons and smoke signals and next thing you know there's like a tall building alert. I want to go on my roof and jump off because the business end it'll
Right.
just suck the life out of you, and it's like
Right.
I always say I just want to be on stage standing there playing, and
Right.
that is the relief.
That's amazing. Now, after so many years playing, do you have any after effects? Like, do you use earplugs or anything?
Yes.
Have you do use earplugs?
I started using them 25 years ago, and I was 26 at that point. 20, it's going to be 27 or so, and I just kind of realized, this is where it's at, and they're uncomfortable, as you know, if you put them in,
Yes.
but then it's like anything else, you get used to it, and then you realize that you're used to hearing the
Yeah.
sounds come in, and you don't have to worry anymore. So now, if I don't wear earplugs, it's like everything's like.
Yeah.
So
I hear you because I wasn't even playing anything. I was at a gig. I somebody invited me to see Roxette, the Swedish group, at the Orpheum Theater, and I got the seat. There were free seats, but it cost me more than money. I sat right next to the speaker, like the speaker was practically where my headphones are,
yeah.
and it just ruined my ear, and I've had it ever since. I
Yeah,
regret that.
it's I know some people that have tinnitus, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's the yeah, I'm kind of used to it, but I'm thinking I don't think I could get used to hearing loss or it's not even there's the difference between hearing and listening. Obviously, they're two different
Yeah.
things. When you lose some of your hearing or you lose
Hmm.
out on the ability to hear some frequencies, and
Right.
it's usually the high ones that go first.
Yeah.
And when you're listening, like in headphones, um, and I know you can appreciate this because the way the Beatles were mixed back then,
Right.
sometimes in Motown too, it would be all the way to the right. It would be a hard pan to the right,
Yeah.
so you'd hear like just a tambourine in the left,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe a cowbell in the right, and
Yeah.
maybe the vocals would be in the left, and maybe something else would be in the right.
Right.
But you got to listen in stereo, and it
Right.
really gave you more of an appreciation sometimes. But the problem is some things are mixed in a frequency that someone will say, I didn't even hear that.
Right.
And that's, I don't ever want to lose that.
Right. Well, you were very wise to do what you did with the headphones, with the earplugs, I mean.
Yeah.
What would you tell people of any age who would like to get into music the way you are, the way you have done it? Is it doable? Let's say you meet a 35-year-old guy and he played when he was young and he wants to get back into it. What would you tell him?
Do it, play, get in.
Yeah.
Just, there's something for everybody.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like you can think about um, photo editing, which we'll talk about.
Hmm.
I do that. I love
Hmm.
photo editing.
I want to talk about that in a minute.
I don't, in a roundabout way, obviously. I mean, I teach graphics, so I mean, I make money per se.
Hmm.
But if somebody, sometimes I'll be on Facebook and somebody will post a photo and I'll look at it and I'll cringe. And so what I'll do is I'll bring it into Photoshop, I'll clean it up, and then I'll just send it back to them. I'll
Yeah.
say, here, cleaned it up in Photoshop for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and oh, thanks. Wow, that's awesome. I appreciate it. It's because it's what I love to do, and I
Yeah.
love to just see results. And so with music, you know, it's not quite as easy as you know, if a bar owner says, "Hey, I'm having a cookout in my backyard. Why don't you get the band and bring it over?"
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll play for free. Maybe give me a burger, and we'll hang around all day and let me know when you want me to stop. I mean, obviously, again, that's the business end is the politics of
Yeah.
the passion of music. They're two different
Yeah.
things. So, I mean, to me, I say you absolutely have to um, white knuckle grip the passion end of it
Hmm.
because that's what keeps you in it. That's what.
That's a great answer. And that's, I keep saying this to every guest that I've had is that as a teacher, I see people who have promising talent, maybe as a voiceover person, maybe as an actor, maybe as a camera person, maybe they're good artists. And often I'll see them later and they're doing something completely unrelated, which is fine. Except I say, do you ever play the trumpet anymore? Do you ever draw anymore? And they just don't. And that just makes me very sad
Mhm.
because I think people would be much happier with different outlets and it keeps your brain active.
I know some very, very, very talented musicians that just kind of threw it aside.
Yeah.
I know some people that, and again, the talent. It's really a dirty word because people
Yeah.
don't understand what talent even means. I
Hmm.
mean, so I won't so much focus on it, but it's like I look at myself, and I don't know, maybe because um, I've played some really decent gigs. I was
Hmm.
lucky enough to play on some people's albums. And I was
Hmm.
lucky enough to be in a couple of high profile situations where, it's just that's the tip of the iceberg. The fact is, I'm not that great of a bass player. I just do what I do. If you
I
say,
think you're great. You're better than me.
well, I mean, the thing is, though, I'm friends with some people that teach at Berkeley.
Right.
And if you want to talk about well-rounded and what their ability-wise,
Hmm.
the amount of ground that they can cover and the amount of things that they can do,
Hmm.
but that's not what it's all about because there are people that can do all this, but
Hmm.
yet they can't take any of it and A, make money and B,
Right.
be happy.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
I have this much, and you know, I mean, that's really it. You could be a shark in Lake Superior, or you could be a guppy in a thimble. And
Right.
the fact of the matter is, it's you can't
Right.
really make them relatable because somebody me, I'm a very small fish in a very small pond, but I make it work. And yes, I get paid for every gig I do, but I work for a living. As you
Right.
know, we teach together, and
That's right.
I didn't want to make um, if you make something like passion into a must make money at it.
Hmm.
Now it's a business. It's not passion anymore.
Yeah.
People will argue you can love your job and you never have to work another day of your life. And it's like, yes, but you are working and you are getting paid. So,
That's
like, for
right.
instance, I love teaching and I
Yeah.
love my job. As you
Hmm.
know, I love it. I, have a lot of
Hmm.
fun doing it, but I get paid for it.
Right.
Now, if somebody said to me, "Hey, so you love teaching," I was thinking, "How about you come in for the next 6 months and we're not going to pay you?" And I say, "How about no?" Right?
Precisely. I think any teacher would say that at this point when you've
Well,
been in it as
it's
that long.
because you can't. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Right.
We
Right.
get paid because we are putting the time in, and so the music career I get paid because
Right.
I'm putting the time in, and if I don't, people take advantage, and that's that pyramid scheme.
Right. And those reasons were what kept me when I was subbing. I had a chance to work at the Disney store one time, and I said no, because then I won't like to go to Disney anymore. You know,
Sure.
so it's too much of a good thing sometimes. I want to go to your other passion, which is restoring old photographs and the history, particularly of Revere Beach. And you're a member of, I think, Revere, a couple
Historical.
of Revere
Yeah,
groups.
yeah. So it's the Revere Historical Society.
Okay.
Um, there's he's a good friend of mine now. I got to meet him a couple of years ago, Bob Upton, and he's the what is he, the chairman or whatever his title is, but
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of the lead guy at the over at the Revere History Museum. And so there was a photo that that he had on the page, and I said to him, I think I sent him a message and said I had a better version of that. And oh,
Hmm.
do you mind if I copy this photo? And so we ended up talking, and I realized that, this is where I need to be. I need an organization to be a part of.
Right.
And so it's been great working with Bob on some projects.
And you're also on Remember in Revere When, which is a Facebook group, right?
That one, and it's more Old Revere Beach Memories, I think it's
Right.
called. That's Revere resident Larry Greenstein.
Yeah.
He's like Clark Kent. I don't actually think I ever met him. We only know each other through social media, but
Right.
he was like me back in the late '70s. We both had the Kodak, the 110, that
Hmm.
had the four-sided flash bulb.
I remember.
So he took his. He was older than me. He took his everywhere, all over Revere, and he has some really, really good photos that he managed to capture. Me, I was younger, but I did the same thing. I took a lot of photos. And now, in my case, my mother was on the Revere Historical Commission,
Okay.
and this was in the '70s, and her and I are very similar um, in in delivery and in sarcasm and things like that. Type A personality, where if you do something, you dive right into the rabbit hole head first.
Right.
And she would be up until 2, 3 a.m. She was a night owl, and I am too. So sometimes I would stay up and help her. But I didn't really get into the historical aspect
Right.
until probably a few years before she passed away. So now I'm knee deep in stuff that I could be like, Ma, can you answer this question?
Yeah.
No, because she's not here. So,
Uh,
but it's allowed me to dig deeper.
and you write a lot of history as well. You write little articles about things that you discover.
Well, you know what it is. So, thankfully, there's people like Bob Upton who Bob will tell you he's not a historian; he's an enthusiast.
Hmm.
Now, Jeff Perlman, who teaches at he taught at the Lincoln when I was a kid and at the high school.
Yeah, I knew him then too.
Yeah, and he's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
I would say he must be 2/3 of everybody's favorite teacher because he's just such a nice guy, easy to
Mm.
talk to. And I would say if there's an official historian of Revere, it should be him because
Right.
at this point, I would say he's the one. But there's a large gap because, for instance, there was Peter McCauley was the guy.
That's the guy.
He was the guy who really knew the most about Revere Beach,
Yeah.
and he's unfortunately no longer here.
Yes.
He did leave behind some great things. I mean, I have all these books that just piles and piles of them, that he wrote or others wrote.
Hmm.
There's a book by Shurtleff that came out about 1937 that it's probably the best book that you can get in terms of bridging the history of
Hmm.
Revere from whenever Revere, not Revere. I'm not talking about when it became a town and when it became a city. I'm talking about when the actual soil was settled by people.
Okay.
And we're talking about the 1600s. So
Okay.
there's a lot of information from here to here. And so you say, okay, well, that's good. It's good that we have books. But now what I'm going to tell you is it's almost inconceivable, to use a word,
Yeah.
Princess Bride right there. It's almost inconceivable that you probably can't find more than a couple of people that could tell you what ride was where on the beach and
Right.
what amusement and what merry-go-round and what roller coaster. And I
Right.
came to find that out. Bob Upton, I was part of a banner project with him from last year on Revere Beach. And I had to dig deep to find out where this was located or where this was located. And I realized there really isn't much of a map.
Right.
And so that's why I started researching, and then I would start putting it out there for people just so that it could be documented, that somebody put it out there so that maybe in the future, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be anybody's historian, but
Right.
I wanted to be that somebody will say, that guy Lou, he was willing to dig and he put it out there, and now
Hmm.
someone else in the future will maybe remember it was there.
Now, will somebody come along like a cartographer and make a map out of that? Maybe.
That's actually what I'm in the process of working on.
Yeah, you could. You could. I'm sure you can find one out there. You know.
Yeah, and the thing about the problem though with this, and for instance, you could think, I'll give you an example. So the Cyclone roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
most people know it was right after the MDC police station,
Yeah.
but that was only from 1925.
Mm-hmm.
So from 1900 to 1925, there were three or four other things that were there. And so in order to do any kind of if you got a cartographer, well, they would naturally put that there.
Mm-hmm.
But there was an airship ride. There was Thompson Scenic Railway was
Right.
there.
Right.
Before that, there was something else. So it's like you could say that about most of the beach, that there are 4 or 5 or 6 things that are in every spot.
Right.
And so I'm working on it though.
One thing that strikes me is that we're living in a kind of a parallel time period between the 20th and the 21st centuries. For instance, there's a big difference between 1980 and 2020. We can see that. But when we look back between 1920 and 1880, we might think that there's not such a big difference because we don't know that culture as intimately. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So
absolutely.
it just strikes me that there's just so you can't make these assumptions. Oh, there was a roller coaster there. You know, it might not have been there in 1880. It might have only been there in 1901.
Well, right, and it's how we remember it. I mean, you know, if I go down Squire Road in Revere, I still call Dairy Mart, I still call it Sunnyhurst.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Even
yeah.
when Ames was open, I referred to it as Zares for God knows
I
how long.
I did the same thing. I think anybody does that in their hometown. So let's get back to you for a second now. In the two passions that you have besides your career of graphic design, if you had to give one up, this is a standard interviewer question. If you had to give up one up, which one would you give up, or could you?
Um, which hand would you give up, your left or your right?
Well, I guess that answers that question. Then you couldn't.
Yeah, you know what happens when you dig deep. You
Yeah,
know, um,
yeah.
I mean, if you ask me to get rid of this golf ball, I just found it yesterday,
Uh
so
huh.
that big a deal.
Right.
I mean, if you ask me to get rid of this book that I've had for a while, the answer
Right.
would be, well, no, it's a part of me.
Right. I
I've
getcha.
had it for a while. So yeah, and when you're doing something that you love, and you find your calling,
You
so
do.
to speak, and it's kind of funny that people a lot of times they think that to find your calling, it has to be something that you make money at or something that you're
Right.
tremendously good at. I mean, some people find their calling to go out and play golf, and they
Right.
never break 90, but that's their calling.
Right.
That's their biggest
Mm-hmm.
hobby, and it's what they do twice a week till they pass away, and they love it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky that I can get paid to do some stuff, but I'm even luckier that I love to do these things.
That's great. And that's just what this show is all about. What do you want to do? And I think more people should explore the side of themselves that will make them a little bit happier. And they won't be those 9 to 5 warriors that only look forward to the weekend and they don't enjoy every other day of their life, you know?
Well, if I can bore you with a quick story,
Sure.
when I was a kid, my father worked at Wonderland Dog Track.
Okay.
Actually, he was a laborer, and I remember he was putting his lenses on. He put his lenses on every day at 5 minutes of 7, and I used to get up,
Contact lenses.
contact lenses, and I'd be eating my cereal next to him. And I just remember I had gone to the fridge to get the milk, and he put his lens in, and he had this white hanky that he used to use because he had hard lenses, so he'd
Mm-hmm.
be putting them in, then he'd take the hanky and wipe. And I remember he just took the hanky and he just slammed it down on the table. He said, "You know what? Don't ever hate your job. Don't ever take a job that you hate." And that
Wow.
was about probably 1974.
Wow.
So fast forward, I went to vocational school. I took graphics. I didn't go to college right away. I went into the graphics industry. And so now here I am doing the thing that I wanted to do because I was a student. I wanted to learn how to run a printing press. And there I am doing it. And here it is now. The year is 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And my car was in the shop, so my father gave me a ride to work. And here I am in work, disgusted. And I thought about it. I was like, I remember that day like it was yesterday. My father throwing his hanky down and saying, "Don't ever hate your job." And I said, here I am. I absolutely hate what I do for a living. And
Huh.
I thought to myself, why am I here? Who put me here? How did I get here? Blah, blah, blah. I was the author. I drew all the photos. It was my book. It was my life. And I was responsible for all of it. And, and the fact is, they say, well, who's going to change that?
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, it took me another 5.5 years. But that was when I started teaching. But it was because of that conversation, I ended up, I ended up having a blowout with my boss and I quit.
Hmm.
And so I walked out and I realized I don't have my car. I had to walk back in and ask if I could use the phone. So, I used
Wow.
the phone. I got in the car and my father, I get in the car and I said, I quit. And he goes, good for you. You hated that job. You hated doing what you do for a living. He says, find something you like to do. And so,
That's a great lesson, I think, for a lot of people.
but you have to, I had great parents. I mean,
Yeah.
my father was the best. I mean, somebody
Yeah.
else gets in that car and their father says, you're an idiot. Get back in there and apologize. Or what are you going to do now, you loser? You got no job. My father, though, I think that he remembered throwing his hanky down too. And he always said to me, don't ever hate your job. And I was Sunday afternoons, 5 o'clock, loading up the washing machine, just
Right.
thinking, I can't believe the weekend's over.
Yeah.
And so I
You've
guess
been
that's
there.
that's kind of where I'm at right now in life, is to understand that even though that was 16 years ago, where
Right.
I'm at right now, I love what I do for a living. I love where I'm at. And I love to be able to go and do laundry and not even think that, wow, all this time off,
Right.
and now I got to go back to work.
Right. Right.
So,
That's a great lesson and great for this show. I knew you were the perfect guest, Lou. Two
well,
things that you're passionate about, and you had that great story about your dad, and that's great. So thanks for joining me here.
thanks for having me. I'll come back anytime you want.
Definitely you'll be back. So until then, everybody, what do you want to do?